I thought we should first talk about your trip. You were just in Palestine, and it's quite the moment in Palestine. I just thought we were sort of opening up, and you could give us a sense of like, I mean, as dumb as this question is, like, what's the vibe there? Like, what's because it's quite this new Zionist government is pulling out all the stops and terrorizing Palestinians. I mean, what's new? But I guess this is kind of new. I guess in some ways it feels new.
I don't know, Sina. I mean, I've been going to Palestine since '89. I was there in the first Intifada as a pretty young person, and because I wanted to be there. So the way I did this trip is I spent 8 days. It's the way Palestine is organized. I spent about 8 days in Jerusalem because it's just so difficult. So, and most of those days I was in Jerusalem, except I went to Haifa for one day, just on a day trip. And so Jerusalem was just, beautiful as always, but Palestinian, but it's very tense. It's very tense. And the old city is always tense. Basically businesses are barely, they stay for sumud, but the tourist industry is dominated by the Israelis. And a lot of the property, including the business property, is waqf. And so, and a lot of
That's the
property
Jordanian religious authority, right? Like or
yeah,
like the
and right.
semi-Jordanian, yeah.
I mean, Waqf is like exists, right, all over, but yeah, the Jordanians are still in charge of Waqf, and Waqf is all the religions. It's all the religions but a lot of businesses they pass their property generation to generation through Waqf, right? So if it wasn't actually for that, I think that property would be gone. Not that the Israelis have not stolen Waqf. I can't say for sure they haven't, but yeah. But also the other thing that I learned on this trip is that a lot of tourists, like in large groups, especially the pilgrims that are coming from Europe and the United States, they get told don't shop at the Palestinian shops, don't go to the Muslim shops. So it's just kind of surreal because you have a lot of big groups that are organized, but they don't buy from Palestinians. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. And yet it's also beautiful. And that's how it is outside the old city as well. I love Jerusalem, but it does have these, things that, it used to be in the old days, the Hajjat, were like they were in the front of Bab al Amud, Damascus Gate. That you had like all kinds of things from the village, greens, foods, and there's still a little bit of that, but now there's two really ugly Israeli structures. They're not passing structures; they're physical structures. In my vision, they're not going to be permanent, but there they are in front of Bab al Amud. And yeah, so that's how that Jerusalem was, just like that, where people are just holding and living, also living. And that's the way it always is in Palestine, like these multiple kinds of realities, because, you can't allow them to destroy all dimensions of life. So yeah, and then I went to Haifa with a friend and my son, and that was just like a day trip, and it also has a different, you pass eventually this massive wall that, especially by Kalkilia, and you just like there's just this reality, Israel, and then the other side, the territory is occupied in 67 and more than that. And, uh, um, and then in Haifa, you really can't say Palestinian. Do you see what I mean? It's like they use the language of Arab, Arabs. but we walked to Wadi Nisnas, which is the Palestinian area, and that was pretty beautiful, and just lovely. Eating the way they do it in Wadi Nisnas, which is these shabby restaurants. They cook like 7 pots of food, different foods, and you kind of buy a plate for the table, as many plates as you want, of the delicious things in the pots. So that was pretty nice. But it's always it's heartbreaking too. And then I was in Ramallah for the rest of the time, and I saw friends, I saw colleagues, I hung out a lot, and it always feels it's an illusion, but it feels better after you get past all this stuff. It feels less tense than Jerusalem. Uh, but it kind of depends. You just have an event, and but that's where all the elites are. But there are also a lot of poor people, peasants, farmers. Ramallah and Beira they have everything. And then I took a trip up to Nablus, because I gave a talk at Najah and university, and I thought, wow, Nablus is great. And so I spent the day in the Khan with a family friend at like the morning before. Then I had this big event, and then afterwards we went out, and I thought, wow, I love Nablus, and it feels different from Ramallah. But of course, you're passing all these just settlers, soldiers, but still, I still felt different than Ramallah. And then a few days later, in daytime, there was that raid, on the Khan, and and then like everything, yeah, it changes like that in Palestine. So that's how I would say it was. And then I hate the borders. They're terrible for everyone, unless I think you're Jewish. Um, and I always do the land border. And again, it's unpredictable. You don't really know what's going to happen. It's expensive to cross the land border from Jordan. But it was uneventful relatively. I mean, I still got a little bit of an interrogation, but it was fine.